Hey everybody, welcome to the third episode of the Network Automation series, and today we're going to do some configuration. I'm going to show you how to use Ansible to configure NTP, banner, SNMP, and the host name of the nodes that we have running in CML. Now when I run through my demonstrations in person, or I work through some of the labs that I've built in the past, I like to implement new elements as I move through the demo. And in this video, we're going to do exactly that. I'm going to talk about 3 new things that Ansible can do for you with your playbooks. And that's the group vars folder, import tasks module, and setting tags on your tasks that are in the playbook. Now, we'll talk about those elements as we work through the lab, but as they come up, I will point them out and explain what the value of using them is when you're working with your playbooks. So to get started with this, we're going to move over to VS Code, and we're going to do the first thing we need to do, which is set up our automation jump host as an NTP server. So let's move over there and take a look at that. We're over in VS Code now, and I'm already logged into the Ubuntu host running in Cisco Modeling Labs. We're going to go ahead and install NTP. Now, I like to use the Chrony package for doing NTP. If you know how to set up the regular NTP package, which I also know how to do, you can use that. I like Chrony because it's just really simple to get configured and enable for NTP purposes. To install the Chrony package, we just need to do a sudo apt install Chrony. And it's going to reach out to the Ubuntu servers and pull that package down and get it installed. Once it's installed, we need to set up Chrony to allow our management network to get NTP from this host. Now, if you're not using the same subnet that we are here, I'm using 172.16.1.0/24. If you've used something else, you just need to make sure you're allowing that subnet to use this as an NTP server. We're going to VI the configuration file, which is in etc chrony.conf. And we're going to scroll down to the bottom. I just go to the bottom, and because this is just a lab, I'm not trying to do anything crazy here. We're just going to create an allow line, and we're going to say 172.16.1.0/24. And that's all we need to do to allow our management devices, the network devices, to reach out to this NTP server to get time. We'll save the file, and then we are going to do a sudo systemctl restart Chrony. And it's not running yet, but we're just going to restart it because I like to restart in case I need to run this again. And we'll just do a quick status. And we can see that Chrony is now running and active. And now this server can use or provide time to our hosts in CML. So now we can go ahead and start setting up our Ansible folder for our system configuration. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get the system set up to do our folders for the Ansible directory. I'm going to clear the screen here, and I'm going to create a new folder here, and we're going to call this basic system config. And this will be the new directory that we use for setting up the Ansible playbooks that we're going to do today. I'm going to come over here and cd into basic system config, and we see that we have a blank folder. Now, since we have the show commands folder here from our previous lab, I can actually come over here and grab a couple things that I'm going to need for this new playbook folder that we don't need to recreate. So I have this inventory file. We're going to copy this folder, and we're going to paste it into the basic system config. And we're going to get the ansible.config file, and we're also going to copy that to basic system config. So now if we do an ls-l, we can see that that ansible.config file is there, and our inventory that we've already created for our devices is populated in the folder. So now we're ready to start writing our first playbook for setting up our devices. So we'll go ahead and get that playbook set up, but the first thing we want to do is talk about one of those new elements I discussed earlier, and that's the group vars directory. Now, when we were discussing the inventory file in our last video, I mentioned that this all key applied to all of the devices inside the inventory file. And we set this variable up for Ansible connection for network CLI because in this inventory, all of our devices are network devices. But this is not necessarily something we would want to do if we had servers mixed in here and we wanted to apply, Ansible connection to, a specific group or something like that. So generally, when I do my inventory file, I like to keep the variables out of the inventory file, and I like to put them into a respective vars folder. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new folder here. I'm going to call it group_vars. So you can see that's right under the basic system config directory. Do an ls. And the first thing we want to do is create an all.yml. All.yml is going to be the equivalent of having this all and vars here. We're actually going to take the Ansible connection line out and we're going to move it into all.yml. And go back and we can delete this. And we just make sure our spacing is all correct. And you see now we have this super clean file. We have no variables in here. We just have the hosts and the Ansible host and Network OS things that were there previously. I'm going to go ahead and save this file. Now, for NTP, we want to apply NTP to all of the devices. And I'm going to create a NTP server variable, and I'm going to call it 172.16.1.1 because that is the IP address of the host that we're on here. So that's the NTP server variable, our key value pair that we're going to set for NTP server to be used in our Ansible playbooks. I'm also going to do an additional variable called banner, and I'm going to set this up to global all banner config. And so what this would do is, if I set the banner up, it would apply to all the devices and set global all banner config. But to demonstrate how, if you create additional groups, more specific groups that would reference the routers and switches groups that we already have created, I'm going to show you that if we create a group var for those, so I'm going to do routers, and I'm going to do switches. The configuration in here is going to take precedence. So I'm going to do banner again, and I'm going to do, this is the banner for routers, and I'm going to do this one, I'm going to do switches. So we'll see that when our playbook runs, because when we create our playbook for banner and we execute it, when it goes to apply the banner variable for the switches and the routers, it's going to pull this key value pair over the key value pair that we have configured in the all.yml file. Where we don't have NTP server set up, it'll take this as its default and use it for all the devices. But if I did have a different NTP server that I wanted to set under routers and switches, I could set that up, and that would take precedence over what was in that configuration. The last element that we're going to do with our all.yml is come back and create a SNMP user, and we're going to call it SNMP v3, and we're going to create an SNMP group called SNMP v3 group. And what this will do is give us our username and our group for the SNMP user. We'll set the passwords up manually. In a later video, we're going to talk about Ansible Vault and how we can secure our passwords in the Vault so that they're not sitting in clear text in our file. But for the purposes of this lab, just to show you how to get some things set up, we're going to just create the user group here and then manually configure the passwords in the module. So we're going to go ahead now and we're going to move to setting up the next new element, and that is the tasks directory, which we'll use to eventually import into the playbook using the import tasks module. So let's take a look at that. So we're going to come back to basic system config. I'm going to do another new folder, and I'm going to call this one tasks. And what we're going to do with this tasks folder, I'm going to back out here, is we're going to create files called banner.yml SNMP.yml, Hostname.yml, and finally NTP.yml. And what we're going to do in these different YAML files is configure the modules that we're going to use to set up the devices. So in our previous video, when we did the show commands, I created a playbook called show commands, and we did show version and we did show interfaces, but I had both the NXOS and iOS modules set up in the playbook, like the actual physical playbook. By creating this tasks directory, we're separating out the modules from the physical playbook and putting them into this folder of tasks with individual file names. What's the benefit of doing this? Well, if you think back to our show commands, and we can go back and look at show interface, we can see that we have 28 lines of configuration. Now, this is just to do show interface brief, and in this case, we're doing debug, so there's 28 lines to show the version or show IP interface brief, print the output, do show IP interface brief again, and print the output. We're going to do 4 different tasks in this new set of playbooks. And if you think about everything we're going to do today, we've got 28 lines here. We could easily 4x the configuration, so we could probably go to 120 lines easy. But by separating them out, I'm making it easier for me to work on the individual files. So if I need to make changes to banner, I only have to come to this banner.yml file to make my changes. I don't have to go dig through a playbook to figure out where banner.yml is in the list of tasks. You can name things and make it easier to look for it, but why dig through a single file that's super long when you can have this very simple to look at single file that's only doing a single task for 2 different devices, so that you can actually make the changes you need to. And the same applies for the rest of these. If any one of these had an issue or needed an update, you only have to fix this file. So that's the benefit of having the tasks file. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to go grab the modules and the configurations for each one of these to get it set up. And we're going to look at the ansible.doc, just like we've done before, to get our configurations and start setting up these devices. So let's work on that. So we'll do what we've done before, do ansible-doc-l, and we'll look for cisco.ios. And we'll start with the banner. We want to find the banner config, and we see here that there's cisco.ios.ios_banner. We're going to copy that, and we'll do ansible.-doc and paste the banner module. And we can see that we get our options for banner, how it works. If we come down and look, we see that we can configure a login banner using the iOS banner with banner login, or if we want a message of the day, we can do MOTD. We see that again up here that our options are login, MOTD, exec, incoming, and slip-PPP. So we're going to do a login banner. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this block. We're not going to copy the multi-line delimiter. We're actually just going to use our variable. And I'm going to come up here and in the banner.yml, I'm just going to paste the login banner. I'm going to put a note in here that says iOS. And for our text, we're going to double check the banner and we're going to just use banner variable, and we're going to do a double quote, and then we're going to do 2 curly brackets. Now again, VS Code's nice. We saw that I did the double quote and it added both sides. As well with the curly brackets, we have the inner, 2 inner and 2 outer that we need to set up our variable. And all I need to do is type banner. And it was that easy. I've configured my login banner for iOS. I'm going to do the when Ansible_network_OS is equivalent to iOS. And now we've got that set up. Now, one of the nice things with the newer Cisco modules is that, generally speaking, if we do ansible-doc and we look for cisco.nxos.nxos_banner, the names generally match between the 2 platforms. There are some differences between how some of them work, but for the most part, the banner or the modules will match the name of the iOS side and the NXOS side pretty evenly. But when we look at some of the options here, we can see that our options here are exec or message of the day, and we don't have a login option. And again, this goes back to just some of the subtle differences between how NXOS and iOS work and where you can apply certain features. If we look at the configuration, it's pretty much the same. It's just that this gets applied at the exec level as opposed to the login level. And we're going to do our double quotes. And this is just the indicator for what a variable is in the Ansible configuration. So our modules are set up. We're going to copy this when line. And we're going to change this to NXOS. And we've now defined a playbook, or I should say a task for NXOS and iOS to do banners. And it was that easy. We've got both of them configured and it's super clean. We've only got banner configuration in this file. So we're going to do the same thing for SNMP, Hostname, and NTP and get all of those set up to do the configuration for our playbook. So we'll quit out of here and we'll move on to setting up Hostname, NTP, and SNMP. So for each one of these, again, I'm just going to do Ansible doc and we'll do Cisco.ios-L. And we will find the hostname setup. I'm going to copy that. Remove the -L and look for hostname. And we can see that it's a very simple configuration here. We just grab this. We will set the hostname up. Now, I don't have a variable set up for hostname, but Ansible has a built-in variable called the inventory hostname that it knows from what you have configured in inventory. So I can do inventory_hostname. And what will happen is when the system goes to query for this variable, it will look at what's configured in the inventory and say, oh, I have this inventory hostname of CAT or CAKV Internet or N9KV Switch 1, and I'm going to apply the configuration based on what I know my inventory name is. We're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to copy this directly, speed this up a little bit, paste that. Now I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to copy this. I'd be willing to bet that these are probably pretty close between NXOS and iOS, and I'm just going to change this to NXOS to NXOS_hostname. And we're going to take a look. I'm gambling here. I'm just going to change the doc to do NXOS and NXOS hostname. And we can see config hostname. It looks very similar to what we've got up here. And if we look at it, we can see the hostname configuration is identical. So you can see even with some of the modules, like some of the simpler modules, the configuration is the same. In fact, if you think about it from being on the CLI perspective, you'd log in a device, you do conft, the next thing you do is type hostname. It's the same between NXOS or iOS, and I'm sure the structure of this module in the back end is very similar in how they do the authentication and actually get into the device and do this configuration. So our hostname is set up now. We're going to go to NTP now, and we're going to look at NXOS, actually do -L Cisco.NXOS, and we'll look for NTP. And we have this global NTP configuration. And we can see it explains how to set up our NTP configuration. I'm just going to look for the sample config. And we see we have this pretty lengthy setup here. We only really need down to this servers part. So I'm going to grab this first block here, paste it, and get rid of that. That's random. And then we're going to grab servers. Now we don't have a key set up, so a lot of this is just going to get deleted paste that. We can see if we look at it, we need to go 2 spaces in on servers, and we're going to define our server, which is going to be NTP server, and we'll just double check NTP server. We're going to delete that line, and we're going to set our VRF to management because NXOS, we're using the network or we're using the management interface. We want to make sure that we're using the management VRF to reach out, and we're going to go ahead and save this. Now we'll look at the iOS setup. Just see if this is the same, and yep, it is. Now if we scroll down, there's quite the lengthy bit, so let's look. We've got ios.config. So all of this block is the same. And come down a little bit. All right, so we can see we've got this servers tab, so that matches. And then we're going to have our list of servers. So we'll do server. We'll have the same NTP server. Need to look for a VRF option. Let's just scroll up here and see if that exists. And we see there is a source VRF. And we'll say management. Now we need to set a source interface up because NXOS and iOS are just different enough. We need to specify the interface that our address is going to use, and we need to come back and we need to use this source value, and we need to set that to gigabit Ethernet 8. Now this would be another thing that would be great to set up as a variable. In fact, I'm going to do that. I'm going to change this. I'm going to call this NTP source int, and under my routers group, NTP NTP. And you see, as we've been working on these files, we've started to get some common things that show up, and this is because Visual Studio Code has learned some of the files that we've got open, and we see this NTP source int, and I can just do gigabit Ethernet 8. Save that. Come back. I'm going to save this file, and we'll double check our NTP configuration. So we've got NTP source int set up. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to get our SNMP server set up. For SNMP, we're not going to look at the Ansible doc though, and what we're going to do is I have some pre-staged config that we're just going to copy here, and we're going to configure it in this file, the SNMP.yml task, and we're going to save it. And we'll just do a quick look, and you can see that we've got the iOS SNMP server module. There's a configuration section where we define our groups, and for the first list, we're going to say this group, we're going to use SNMP group, which is coming from the all.yml file right here. We see it's going to be named SNMP v3_grp. If we go back, we can see that we're setting our version to v3, and we're going to use the privacy option for our version. For users, we're setting authentication up for SHA with a password. For encryption, we're setting our password for priv AES 256, and then we are setting our group and username. Again, our version for that user, what our source interface is, and this will only apply when the network OS is iOS. You see, this is what the iOS config is going to look like, but we see down on NXOS, it's a little bit different. I'm going to move this out of the way. We don't have that groups option, and that's because NXOS has roles assigned for network admin and network operator. So the all.yml parameter of SNMP v3 group would not work because we don't have a role defined of SNMP v3 group on our system, which would render this useless. But this would be a good opportunity to change this group here to something like NXOS role. And we'll just do SNMP role. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to create in the switches.yml NXOS, and we see that SNMP role show up. I'm just going to paste my network-operator role, and that'll be the variable that I use for the NXOS switches. So you can see, even though I have this unique situation where NXOS uses that role, I can define for the switches role, and again, because we're only using NXOS switches for this design, this will work. If you have a mix of switches, this would probably not work. You could potentially do switches and then do like NXOS SNMP role and then iOS SNMP role or group in that group variable folder, that group variable file, and you could set that group here, so this could be like iOS group. But for this purpose, because I know that our switches are just NXOS, I'm just going to create this role here, and we can use it in that switches variable file. So that's where it'll grab that. And we have our configuration now for SNMP. Move this back up. And now we're ready to create our playbook. So we have all of our tasks defined. We've saved everything. We're going to talk about actually setting up the playbook to use these tasks with the import tasks module, and we're going to look at how we apply tags to our tasks so that we can call them individually if we want to make some changes. So let's look at that now. So from our basic system config directory, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call this basic system config.yml. And this is going to be the file where we define our playbook. And as usual, we do the 3 dashes. We do a dash hosts, all, gather facts, false, and we start our tasks section. Now the difference here is that instead of creating the modules and the tasks and names here, we're actually going to import all of the tasks that we created in that tasks folder. To do that, we do our dash to indicate our list of tasks, and we do import tasks. And we're going to do /tasks/banner.yml. Now this will import the banner.yml task that we created in a tasks folder, and it'll execute the 2 modules that are in that file when we go to run the playbook. And I mentioned we were going to apply tags to our tasks. I'm going to do tag banner. What this is saying is that if I run my playbook with the tag of banner, there's a option you can apply to the command when you put it on the command line. If I say to use tags banner, it'll only run the playbook tasks that have the tag of banner associated with it. So if I wanted to update my banner down the road, which we'll do in this exercise, only this task will run when we apply this tag. If I continue adding additional tasks, and we'll just copy this, we need to do 4 tasks. We will do hostname, we will do NTP, and then we will wrap up with SNMP. And we will set an associated tag for each one, indicating which task and tag is associated with which. So we see banner has a banner tag of banner, hostname has a tag of hostname, import task or NTP has a tag of NTP, and SNMP has a tag of SNMP. And that's it. I hope you can see immediately that we have a very simple 14-line configuration for our playbook now, versus if I did this, I've got 11 here, another 11, which is 22. This adds 15 lines, and actually we got a little extra spacing in here, so we'll just clean that up. And actually we need to fix this real quick. It may actually be 15 lines. Get the when and did not apply a name here. Name, apply NXOS config, NTP config, apply iOS NTP config. Get this all lined up. All right, so we see we have 16 lines there. So now we're back here. We have 11, 22, 16 would take us to 38, and then we have another 32 lines. So 38 and 32 takes us to 40, 70. That's 70 lines of configuration that would be in this basic system config.yml file. But because we've separated them out as individual tasks, we only have to apply 14 lines in the actual playbook to call out these each individual tasks. And you can see where this would make it a lot easier to make changes if something were to go wrongly. If I had a mistake in one of those tasks, which there's a possibility there is, I haven't tested these yet, I can go back and I can focus on the one that has the issue. So let's save this. Let's save this NTP one. And we're going to run our playbook. So we're going to do Ansible -playbook. We're going to do basic system config.yml. We don't have to call out our inventory because it's already set. We'll do the username of netadmin -k, and we will execute our playbook. So hopefully all of this works right. And it doesn't like, oh, it is import tasks. Could have this wrong tags. Okay, so it was tags, not tags. So we can see the playbook's executing now. We've configured our banner. We've applied our hostname configuration, which that's what this is because it's the second task. We should really fix that. We see that NTP failed. And we can see SNMP server configured. So let's take a look at this. So it looks like only, yeah, so because we had a failure here on CAKV internet for applying the NXOS config, and I think I know what that problem is, we stopped doing anything on CAKV internet. So that's going to be an interesting way to use our tags, because what we can do is we can go to, let's look at NTP. So that looks correct. So iOS, oh, I see why. It tried to rerun this. It applied the iOS config, and then it tried to apply the second task because I didn't fix my Ansible Network OS. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix this. Because NXOS didn't apply this. It didn't actually run this playbook. So what we're going to do is we're going to rerun the playbook. We did iOS banner. We did exec banner. We did, this could be the host name. We can see that CAKV internet didn't change, and that's because the host name is already configured on the device, but I hadn't set it on N9KV switch 1, so it actually made a change there. So now, since those two didn't run, we're going to do tags, and we're going to do tags NTP, comma, SNMP. And now this should run those two tags and only do NTP and SNMP updates to our system. And it looks like I typed my password in wrong. So we see that it's going in applying the NTP config. We should see the NXOS box apply its NTP config, which it has. SNMP is configured, and now SNMP is configured on all the devices. But you can see we only ran the two tasks that failed. We fixed where this one said it was okay because it had already done it. The NXOS device actually ran because we fixed this Ansible Network OS to match NXOS. Obviously, that failed originally because you can't apply the NXOS configuration to an iOS box. It's just different. And again, even though these things look very, very similar, they're just different enough in the way they apply on the device that it doesn't work. So the behind-the-scenes module is doing some things with the commands and how it configures it that iOS and NXOS don't play together with NTP configuration. So again, very important to make sure you're using the right module for the right operating system. But you can see we've now applied our entire configuration. And if we log into our devices, so you should be able to come up here, we'll do netadmin. We can see that this is the banner for routers has applied. And if we go and log into our switch, we can see that this is the banner for switches has applied. Our host name is set. We should be able to do a show run and see that the SNMP user is set up. The v3 user that we created is done. It has the role of network operator, which we set in the switches group variable. We can come back, and actually it was the username, but yeah, that's right. Just confirm. And that's one of the things with NXOS is even though we just created that SNMP user, it created a username as part of that process. So we see that we have the SNMP v3 network operator, the passwords and privacy options that we set. We'll go double check that with the iOS device. We can see the NTP configuration, we can see the banner, and if we come up, we can see that our SNMP server group of test v3 was created, or I should say v3 group was created, and our source interface using gigabit 8th was set up. If I do show SNMP-user, we can see that our v3 user was created with SHA and AES 256 in the group of SNMP v3_grp. So we can see where the all.yml variables applied configuration, where we wanted it applied consistently, because all of our devices use this, but where we had this SNMP server role of network operator, we created that unique variable in the group vars for switches, and it pulled that. These two banner lines that take precedence over the all.yml banner of global all banner. We can see that switches got its configuration, routers got its configuration, and these are all important things to just understand about building out your variables. If you start running into problems where you assign a variable and it's not going the way you expect, it could be that you've got precedence somewhere else that's saying, well, I have a more specific variable in this group.yml file, and it's what's going to get applied to the device. So organizing your files and building out when you want things to apply to all your devices, when you want specific group variables to be assigned to a group of devices, and for me, like, we're looking at routers and switches here. This would be more of a how are things set up geographically. If you have stuff in the east, the west, the north, the south, if you've got different data centers, whatever that differentiator is between the groups. Again, all of them could use the same NTP server, but if you have things that are specific to a site, you would want to put that in the specific group vars file for that configuration. So I hope looking at this, you can see that we have massively increased the size of what we have in our directory. We now have a group vars directory. We have a task directory. We still only have one playbook. We still have this Ansible config, but we have a lot more stuff under the playbook directory now than we did when we started with show commands. And you can start to see where the configuration of your playbooks can get very, very, very large very quickly. We will see that later. I'm going to show off the VXLAN playbooks that I've created. If you've seen me talk about it on my LinkedIn or Twitter, I have a very, very extensive VXLAN playbook that deploys a fabric, and you'll see the value in having this organization, because we're going to talk about a couple other things in our next video. We're going to talk about host vars. In later videos, we're going to talk about roles, and you're going to see we're building this folder structure and having this organization makes your configuration a lot easier, managing your Ansible playbooks a lot easier, and being able to just come to a single task like we did. We had something wrong with NTP. We were able to go find it really quickly. That would have been possible with everything in this. It would just have been more difficult. So having everything broken out, having this organization, it's very important that as you start working through your Ansible journey that you get comfortable with the organization now, so that as you start progressing and doing bigger, better, grander things, you've already got the organization part, in hand, and building everything out just is a lot easier. So thanks for watching this video. Any questions you have, if you have comments, things you want to know, things you'd like to see different, leave them in the comments section. I really would love to hear what your thoughts are on this, what you'd like to see. And as always, I appreciate you guys watching the video, and I'll see you on the next one.